even though we're a small group today, just really happy to have anybody who's willing to listen to these thoughts regarding caregiving and how do you manage it? It's not an easy task. And I will tell you, I just love to personalize a little bit and tell you that I am a caregiver for an adult child of mine, and was a caregiver for my parents as well, even though I didn't get to walk them through a good long life. I wish I had, but it nonetheless did some caregiving in that regard. So, and it's so unique and it's so individualized. Everybody's journey is just a little bit different. And so we're going to talk about generalizations, but I'm going to try to personalize it for you so that it, might make some sense and might feel comfortable for you. Of course, as Maureen suggested, we'll just certainly entertain questions and try to answer your thoughts. But we're delighted to have you join us in this experience, and hopefully you'll walk away with some validation. I think the validation is important. A lot of what we're going to talk about is really a bit of common sense. So I don't think that I've got any super formula here that's going to make your life just a walk in the park, but I do want to validate what you're going through. And I want to give you permission to be human, and to realize that we do the best we can with what we've got. And we all make errors, and there's no right or wrong in any of this. So marching forward and doing the best job you can is all we can ask of anyone in this experience. So to that end, let's talk a little bit about what we hope to exchange or learn in the course of this hour that we'll be together. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the factual issues of caregiving, the financial impact, the emotional impact, etc., and what you are doing, what load you're carrying as a caregiver, and what impact it has. Sometimes the load you carry is a little bit invisible. So we want to put some facts and figures to that. We want to help understand the impact you make on yourself as a caregiver and on those who you care for. I think that's a critical element. And then also get a good understanding of some of the stress and the caregiver burnout and that you can experience. This is can be for many people, a very elongated race. It's not a sprint. So making sure that you have readied yourself for a long distance effort, a long distanced, I should say, effort is really important. I know I'll pick on my own scenario. My mother, at the end of her life, was diagnosed with cancer, and we got a terminal diagnosis. You can do anything for a short, enumerated amount of time. My mother really was very typical of her hospice and terminal diagnosis. She was diagnosed in December and we lost her in May the following year. It's typically about a 6-month duration that hospice defines, but that was certainly her journey. You can do anything for 6 months. 6 years, that's different. So how do you pace yourself? How do you support yourself through this? That's what we want to talk a little bit about. And then again, how to make sure that you take care of yourself and your well-being and your ability to be resilient in all of this task. Not easy. And again, if I had simple answers, that were templated and we could put in writing and just hand to you, I would do it, I promise. But it's really more of a contouring to what your particular circumstances are all about and where do you go from there. So let's talk a little bit about who is a caregiver. And you can see this picture. We've got the myriad of different elements of caregiving. We've got the busy business person in the upper left corner. We've got the busy mom or the busy female in the upper right-hand corner. She's on her computer. She's probably balancing work and parents and doctor's appointments, etc. So we've got the professional world looked at. We see, potentially a husband and wife in that center picture, trying to manage and take care of each other. This is probably the one category I would say that I think is the most difficult for people to get their hands around, is that that long-term partnership, spouse or partner relationship, where we've been together 40, 50, 60 years, people do not age in symmetry or in tandem. Their trajectories are often very split and they go in different ways. And so as an adult child, you may be trying to manage, those different paths that your loved ones are taking. And it's very hard to address two sets of issues, two sets of concerns, and then throwing your own needs in the middle of that can be very challenging. I think you can also throw a couple of siblings in who might have a couple of different opinions, and you really are balancing a tremendous amount of responsibility and decision making. You can see the intergenerational experience in our lower left-hand corner there. It looks like maybe a granddaughter, a great niece with grandpa, and they're looking at technology. And I know already with my own granddaughter, she shows me things that I would have never accomplished on my own. So the technology of this younger generation and the sharing of that. I met a couple this week. He's 97, she was 94, and they both had email addresses, and both looked at me and said, but we do better with text. And I thought, that's what keeps you young, is trying to stay on board with those changes that life presents. And then our final shot there is kind of that sandwich generation who's raising children, working on some homework there with a young one, but probably trying to manage mom and dad or mom or dad's aunt or uncle's needs along the way. So we caregivers come in all sizes, shapes, forms, colors, languages, etc. There's just no one template for a caregiver as it might be. And everybody's caregiving tasks, again, are so unique and specific to their own needs. So here's a couple of those facts and figures. I think this is very important. We have about 34.2 million Americans who provide unpaid care to an adult over 50 years old in the past 12 months. So 34.2 million Americans not being paid, not being acknowledged, not being, really remunerated other than buckets of love or buckets of anger. It really depends on, again, the circumstances, to taking care of an individual who's 50 years or older just in the past 12 months in our US, good old US of A. 16.1 million are providing unpaid care for someone who has Alzheimer's or another dementia of some sort. And there are many, many forms of dementia. So we've got 16.1 million people providing some sort of support and mechanisms to those with confusion. Look at that third bullet point. Americans provide 18.5 billion. Yes, there's a B there. Hours of care valued at the price point of about $234 billion. And I think this is such a remarkable number because so much of what so many of us do goes unpaid, maybe unrecognized, unvalidated, unacknowledged, but you're doing it. And if you were to hire that out, the costs and the expenditures would be so tremendous. And so trying to get that message across to family members who think that you should be doing this because you owe it to mom and dad, and I work and you don't, and all of those platitudes that we hear, there is serious money at a loss here, either a hit from the income or a cost as to what it would take to replace those hours that are given to a loved one who needs some assistance. Look at that next bullet point, number 4. 34% of caregivers are over the age of 65. So they're not young themselves. And 2/3 of them are women who are caring for all those that in their world, in their immediate world, who need some caregiving support. And then finally, 1/4 of our caregivers, a full quarter of our caregivers are of that sandwich generation. So they're providing some care for an older adult, and they also are providing care for a child under the age of 18. So they're torn. They are pulled between a rock and a hard place. And who do you go and support? You really want to go to that practice, that piano practice, but yet mom has a follow-up to her eye surgery. And how do I balance all of that? very, very challenging. So we wanted you to get some hard, cold facts. And this comes from the Family Caregiver Alliance, a very reputable organization that cites these and tracks these types of statistics. The financial impact is huge. Among working caregivers caring for a family member or a friend, 69% report that they must rearrange their work schedule, decrease their hours potentially, thusly decreasing quite possibly their income, or even actually take an unpaid leave in order to meet those caregiving responsibilities that have either been thrust upon them or chosen by them. So you can see that 70, just shy of 70% are having to juggle, having to make decisions, serious decisions on their income, on their viability, the feasibility of staying, and being that support mechanism for the individual that they feel a responsibility to. Again, a huge financial impact in so many ways, and certainly they're not getting, potentially not getting written a check for the differential there that they are losing should they have to decrease hours or take an unpaid leave. So there's a huge need and a huge recognition that should go toward those unpaid caregivers who are devoting their time and energy to the ones that they're caring for. I think this one is a very helpful bit of information, just to give you certainly an idea of what some of these costs look like, so that again, when family members suggest to you, that you should be taking care of things as it might be, there's a price tag that comes with this care. And even though you may be invisible in regards to that price tag and not being remunerated for your time, these are the remunerations that exist, in regards to what the actual price points are. So you can see, as a simple example, in the nursing home, out of pocket, if you had a private room in a nursing home, you would be paying a minimum of $13,600 a month for the care that's going to be provided to you. In assisted living, this is all a private pay entity. Very rarely is there any subsidizing of these environments, very, very rarely. Some individuals have simply savings, some individuals have long-term care policies, but for the bulk of the clients that we see and that I've worked with in the last 25 years, most of this, if not all of this, comes as a private pay right out of the pocketbook of the loved one that will be moving in or living in an assisted living environment. And I would tell you $5,400 is probably a scotch on the low side, particularly in the Sacramento and surrounding area. In-home care, everybody wants to stay home. I think everybody should stay home as long as they can. But believe it or not, this is probably the most expensive route to go, staying in the home. If you were to bring in professional caregivers, they run about an average of $30 an hour. And you can see the price point here, $3,750 a month, is predicated on 4 hours a day, 7 days a week of caregiving. Last time I checked, there's 24 hours in a day. So that leaves 20 remaining hours per day. And we've already spent near $3,800 to bring an individual in, to give me a little bit of a respite, or you a little bit of a respite from the day-to-day responsibilities. So again, really important that we have an understanding. We typically tell families, when you hit the threshold of about 5 to 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's probably time to take a look at assisted living, because your price point and break even at that point begins to be more cost effective in the assisted living environment. So again, we get to 5 or 6 days a week, or excuse me, 5 or 6 hours a week, and we're at 7 days a week, and we're now really in need of evaluating, is this cost effective? And then we have some adult day programs throughout our community that can be wonderful respite settings for our loved ones, with activities and health support and socialization. However, these are fewer and far between, particularly because of COVID. It means you have to get an individual up, dressed, and ready for the transportation that might be provided, or cajole them into the car and get them to this setting and drop them off. So it's very important that you understand exactly, what's viable, what's feasible, and what's going to work for an individual in that regard. These figures come from Genworth, which is a long-term care providing organization. They sell long-term care insurance. I don't see a lot of long-term care in many of my clients. I see some, which is great, but I don't see a whole lot of long-term care in that regard. So I think if you cannot, it's really important to be able to use that long-term care and activate it as quickly as possible. And a lot of families, a lot of individuals hesitate and they don't get their bang for their buck on that. So I think it's really very important that everybody understand where their dollars are going and where their money's been spent. So these are good hard statistics, again, that are going to tell you exactly what your costs might be and what your family, your loved one is getting, should you not be compensated along these lines of these figures as it might be. So what's the impact? I think this is the sobering news right here, folks, is that many of the caregivers of older individuals are themselves older as well. And if not, they're growing older, which we're all growing older each and every day. Of those caring for someone age 65 plus, the average age of the caregiver is 63 years of age. And 1/3 of those caregivers, 63 years of age or older, is themselves in fair to poor health. So you can see that this is a challenging time, to say the least. And it is important that not only do we care for the ones that we're charged with, but that we do some care and concern for ourselves. We are no good to anyone if we are not good to ourselves. 70% of the working caregivers suffer work-related difficulties, again, due to their dual responsibilities or their dual roles. So again, that limited schedule or taking a leave, etc. There is work-related fallout from being that responsible party in regards to caregiving. And then that third bullet point, again, so very serious, so very important. Caring for someone with dementia is reported to impact the actual caregiver's immune system for potentially up to 3 years after they have ended their caregiving experience. They therefore are more vulnerable, susceptible to developing a chronic illness themselves. So, it's a serious task, and it takes serious effort, and it has serious serious fallout if we don't take, again, a moment to breathe and a moment to care for ourselves. So again, some really serious response to some problems that we experience as caregivers. This one, I think, is really if I get nothing else across today, I think this is really one of the critical ones. And I will tell you, I've been in the industry for a good long time, and this has been a statistic and a statement that I have seen from the very onset of when I joined this industry and began to learn a bit about that aging process. This one notes that there are studies that reveal when someone is caregiving, for a spouse, and they are under some distress, and I think there's stress and distress that comes with caregiving, the caregiver themselves actually has a risk of dying that is 63% higher than those of similar age who are not providing care. So I, as the caregiver, have a 63% greater risk of having a medical concern, a problem, and even the potential of death before the one I'm caring for and for my peers, my cohorts. It tends to be as a result of this combination of stress and physical demands. It just places you at a much higher risk for some significant health issues. And I think we end up not attending to those health issues, not putting ourselves on the back burner and thinking I'll catch that next week when there's more time. Let's be honest, when is there more time? You got to carve out the time when it's in front of you. and take advantage of it to make sure that you're attending to the needs as it might be. I think additionally, here are some signs of stress or burnout. It's very normal. These are all very reasonable issues. Um, and they come not because you welcome them, but they come as a reality of being a human being. We can only be as good as what we put into the fuel we put into our system, and that we protect one another from. So some of the signs can be that you become maybe easily angered with the person that you're caring for, and you sometimes may take your emotions out on that individual. Neither right nor wrong. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, boy, I think I'll just unload on my mom today and make sure that she knows I've had enough of this. I think this comes spontaneously through exhaustion and burnout and weariness, etc. I think this is one of the many reasons we stop, we take care of ourselves, and then we come back to the task at hand, refreshed and ready to go. You may experience a recent and either significant weight loss or gain as a result. Maybe your go-to comfort is, oh goodness, I'll just have mom's dinner and then I'll have my dinner and then I'll have the kids' dinner as well, whatever they don't finish, etc. Or there may be individuals who just are so stressed they can't eat for worry and fear and concern and gyrations. So again, we see this weight gain, we see this weight loss, and it should trigger you to think about, how am I doing here? What's going on? There may be an ongoing feeling of doom, of despair, of negativity. When will this end? When will I be free of this charge? Oh, how dare I have that thought process? It's a pretty vicious cycle that it's hard to get around. And so I really encourage you, it's okay to have those feelings, but you've got to have an outlet to those feelings. You definitely have to have an outlet. And I promise we're going to go into that. Crying for no reason, or maybe over a minor issue. I know when I'm particularly tired, and I as a child was labeled by my father the fastest tear in the West. He could simply give me the cross eye and I would just break out in tears. But I noticed these days as I've grown and matured, that when I'm tired, I'm a little bit more emotional, a little bit more vulnerable. So again, they seem like minor issues, but when the defenses are down, those are the things that tend to loom larger in our experience. Oftentimes we have a significant lack of sleep or are dealing with some insomnia. You're just constantly, the mind is constantly working. It's gyrating in the middle of the night. You've got to put those thoughts away, set them aside, and let the sleep occur. With some restorative sleep, particularly as we age, I think we can tackle just about anything. Lack of restorative sleep, and we're running on fumes at that point. So very, very important to have, that experience of really being able to rejuvenate yourself with a decent amount of sleep. It's a critical element to, again, this longer journey, this slow-paced race that is not a sprint. It's a long distance effort, definitely. Sometimes we see, again, isolation. You feel like you're the only one out there who could be experiencing this. And so we're really huge proponents of, we'll talk about this, support groups, etc. That feeling of isolation is really very real. We're all in this crisis of caregiving, but everybody's experiences are unique. So there may be some who are out there in the midst of the crisis, but don't feel isolation, rather just looking for some tools to manage. Others feel, even though they have friends and family, they still feel that isolation, as it may be. Many are walking through this world again with that sleep deprivation. It's critical, important for all of us to get decent sleep. Boy, the studies of late have told us that sleep is a really important part of our brain health. And so really important to stay on top of some good sleeping habits. You may find that you're inactive. Is there time to get the dog walked or to get out and just get some fresh air? You might at times feel like you're on a treadmill. So the inactivity and the discontent with that inactivity can be a sign of stress or burnout, or no desire to be active. I used to be one that, I'd love to take the dogs for a long walk, but now I'm like, oh, oh, it's just more things that I have to do. So important to get an understanding of, that inactivity and how it's come to be part of your life, certainly if it wasn't there before. We often see poor eating habits. We're on the run, we're on the go. We're trying to get everything done for everybody. And so our eating habits fall to the wayside. We may see more aches and pains in our own body. We're discussing those with our loved ones, and lo and behold, our own body is feeling those aches and pains as we're exhausted and worn out with some of the stress of caregiving. We have a failure to exercise, a failure to the opportunity to exercise, or a failure to the desire to want to exercise. And so again, getting a clear picture of how can I make this work and make a difference and get back into some routine that is successful and healthy for me, mind, body, and spirit, is going to be really a critical part to overcoming some of this stress and the burnout that caregivers often feel. We see fatigue. Oh, I'm tired. I'm always tired. I don't sleep well. I don't eat well. So I'm always tired. The fatigue is real. And it's important to address the fatigue and make sure that it's remedied with some healthy habits. Again, that failure to care for your own personal health needs, critical to put yourself on an equal burner. You don't have to put yourself necessarily ahead of the one that you're caregiving for, but an equal burner to the one that you're caregiving for means that you get your needs attended to as well. And ultimately, there may be a sign of some chronic illness that you obtain as a result of this long-term race that you're in and the wear and tear of that long-term race. So we encourage you again to keep those doctor's appointments and stay with medication that's been prescribed, getting some good eating habits established, and getting some activity along with some good sleep. If you can accomplish all of that, you're managing this dance or this race, excuse me, very, very well. Not easy to accomplish. We're going to try to give you some tools or talk a little bit about how to go after those things that are very important to you, particularly in this realm of burnout and stress. We find that there can be often a pretty big dance between guilt and resentment. Do I really want to be here doing this? Oh, but mom did it for me. Why can't I do it for her? I think you have to have some realistic discussions with yourself and family members and decision makers in your family to realize that we aren't always the best thing for our loved one. And yes, we want to try perhaps, but the guilt of wanting to try and not being successful, or the resentment of being expected to try and not enjoying it, is a dance. And so trying to find your happy medium in there and articulating what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with is going to allow you to find a little bit of that balance. Family members may not want to hear what you have to say, but I think that they owe you an opportunity to share with them how you're doing, how it is feeling as far as caregiving responsibilities, and what role they can play in the responsibility of caregiving with your loved one. So having some personal awareness of what you're able to do and what is best for you as a caregiver is really critical and important. Caregivers often think that they're actually being selfish for putting their own needs first. And I think the word caregiver and selfish really don't go hand in hand. I think they're oxymorons. They do not belong in the same sentence. Anyone who is caring for someone and then subsequently trying to take care of themselves as well to an equal amount is not selfish. They are exercising self-care, and that's an important element of being a successful caregiver. Some of your family members, yourself included, may feel that they owe their loved ones this responsibility or this job, or they have a sense that they're the only ones that can really do the job well enough. And I would contend with part two that, I don't think there's anybody out there who can love my loved ones the way I do. But I do have to concede that I think there are some out there who can do the job a little better than I can, because they aren't emotionally attached. They get to go home at night. They get to regroup, and they get to come back and they get a little training as well. So And yes, we can do a great job, but we are probably not the only ones that can do this job. We probably are the only ones that can love them to the extent that we love them. Sometimes, again, we feel like we owe our family members, our parents, our niece, our aunts and uncles, because they gave to us. And I don't think that any one of those individuals gave to you on the predication or the premise that you would give back to them when the time came. We do the best we can with what tools we have and circumstances we have in front of us. So I don't think there should ever be an obligatory obligation to caregiving. If you can give and caregive and it doesn't impact your life and have an impact upon your life, then that's wonderful, but you may not be able to do that. There are other ways to show your love and your concern. Sometimes we see cultural issues. This can be very difficult. I have two sisters-in-law, bless their hearts, one from Malaysia and one from Mexico. And I know when they first joined our families at different times, they really had a hard time wrapping their head around what it is that I do. And both of them responded, well, in my country, we just take care of our own. And I said, I get it. We'd like to think we could do that too, but sometimes we need some additional help. So this is a cultural stigma as well, and trying to get over that barrier and recognize that that we can assist and be a help to that caregiving process and not step on those cultural toes, as it might be. Sometimes there are caregivers who feel they were not given a choice in this matter. They were essentially forced to take on the role of the caregiver. That may be a reality, but how do we regroup and redirect that within family dynamics? I think there are ways to share the wealth and or speak the truth that I'm not comfortable with this choice that was pushed upon me and given to me. Really sight unseen, no questions asked. It was just assumed. And we did this in our own family. I have a number of brothers, 4 brothers, and one in particular lived in conjunction or in the closest perimeter of my mother at the end of her life. And we just sort of defaulted to him. Well, you live in the area, so you can take care of this, right? And it wasn't until he finally said, guys, I could use some help, that we started seeing and scheduling that the other 4 of us would come in on weekends and alternate the responsibilities, giving my brother, who was local, that respite through the weekend so that he could regroup and come back. It was a good concession, but if he didn't speak up, it wasn't until he spoke up that we were able to address that and work together on that. And boy, I'm going to have to tell you, in all honesty, I'm a reluctant caregiver, reluctant to ask for help. And yet I know in my gut, asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. And we have got to reprogram our heads to realize that saying, I cannot do this all and I need your help, is that true sign of being able to say, I'm vulnerable. I'm not weak, I'm just vulnerable and I need your help. And then thanking someone when you get their help. So I think, again, we've got to be able to say, I need your help. And I thank you for giving of your time. I'm particularly fond of these two and thought processes. We addressed this in the last slide, but I want to reiterate this. Take a look, if you will, for a quick minute at the definition of selfish. Again, it speaks to lacking consideration for others. You're primarily concerned with your own personal pleasure or profit. Again, you can't be a caregiver and be selfish in that regard. There's nothing, to profit from in this other than, being a good, kind human being, but it's not selfish. There is nothing selfish about caregiving. Now, self-care, I think, has a much more clear and appropriate definition. This is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. You're taking this active role in protecting your own well-being and your own happiness, particularly during periods of stress, caregiving. So we need to talk more about practicing self-care, less about somebody ever coming at you and telling you that you were selfish in your approach to things. Don't ever buy that as a tagline. It is so untrue. It is absolutely imperative and commendable to take self-care and utilize that in your life, and particularly in your role as a caregiver. I think that's critical. Look at this one. This is such a, we've all heard this a bazillion times, but there's nothing more true than putting your own oxygen mask on first and then helping others is again, the benefits are multifold. I believe taking care of yourself is critical, and it benefits not only you but everyone around you. So important again to put your own oxygen mask on first. Supply yourself with the rejuvenation of support and care and effort, and you will find your caregiving task to be a little bit easier. And if anybody in your circle has a problem with that, they need to better understand the difference between selfish and self-care, most definitely. And now you can clarify that for them, and I think you should definitely. So a couple ways to manage your own stress and reduce your own personal stress is to take a good look at your role. As a caregiver, are you giving too much? Are you voluntarily giving? Do you want to draw the line? Where are the boundaries? Can you be called at all hours? Or, as I mentioned, I'm a caregiver of an adult child who unfortunately is quite ill, and we have a deal. She doesn't come to me after 9 p.m. with a serious question or decision or discussion, and I don't come to her before 7 a.m. with any of my serious questions or concerns. I'm no good after 9 p.m. and she is no good before 7 a.m. So, find those balances and talk about them and articulate them. And it's an agreeable arrangement we've made, and we're both very comfortable with it as it might be. If you're doing this for a hope of healing a damaged relationship, you better set some pretty realistic expectations of what's really going to be achieved here. You just want to make sure that you are taking, don't do this just because you want to make up for what didn't happen before. You may not get out of it what your expectations are. So just do a check and balance there. Prioritize and pick your battles. You can't be all things to all people. So choose what you can successfully cover and let go of what you can't. Maybe there's someone who can cover that which isn't comfortable for you. Take care of your own health. You've heard that now for the third time here. Get your annual exams, get your screenings, get all those tests done. Keep up with your eyes, your ears, your toes, your nose. You've got to keep up with all body parts and the whole being that you are as a caregiver. And identify that with which you cannot change. We cannot change everything for all people. We have to be who we are. We have to find the peace with it and settle into a comfortable tune of acceptance as a caregiver. And that doesn't always feel good. I readily acknowledge that. Here's a couple of tips for managing stress with caregiving. Maybe try to practice some of that self-care. Go for a walk. The walk doesn't have to be 3 hours and 6 miles. It can be 20 minutes. It's fresh air. It's, the stars in the sky, or the sun as it sets, or the sun as it rises. It's a walk. It's fresh air. Maybe ask a family member or friend to sit with your loved one while you get a step away. And again, if people come in and say, how can I help? Oh, please do help. Book them to that help. Put a time on a calendar and say, great, you want to help? Please come next Thursday at 4. It's on your calendar. It's on my calendar. And that books it, and it makes it happen. It gives the individual who's offering a good role and the individual who's receiving a good respite, a good change of pace. Sneak out and get to dinner. Maybe try to get a treatment, a nail treatment, a massage, something, or maybe purchase something that you've waited a long time to purchase. I know with COVID, we have some additional challenges of not having a lot of places we can go to, maybe that we feel are safe and sound. But I think a fresh air walk, a visit down to the river, an outing up to the mountains. Those are all fair game. You deserve that self-care and you need to practice that self-care. I'm a huge advocate for support groups, and I know not every one of us thinks we're well situated for a support group. I attended a support group and led a support group for many years, attended one for about a year and led one for about 4 years. And it is a good place to feel not so isolated, to be able to share your thoughts, your feelings, learn something. You may learn something about a tool, a technique that's helped others who are in a similar environment that you're in, going through similar things. I think we're all in a crisis of some sort. It's just the crisis is unique to us, and our tools are unique to us with which to manage through that crisis. And again, I think you ask for help and then you got to accept it. And this is the self-talk I give myself every day. Informal and formal resources are available. Your informal resources, of help are the friends and the church members and the family members. They are also well-meaning and so desirous, but sometimes they have their own life going on and they have other distractions. So we think it's very important to make sure that you have formal resources that are available. And these are professional caregivers, professional transportation, professional masseuse, professional physical therapist, somebody who can come in and provide a service so that you can be out doing the things that you need to do for your self-care. I believe truly that the bulk of our population is waiting to see how they can help. We have to ask and we have to accept. I think those are two big asks on our part, but I think it will make your caregiving journey much more viable. I don't know if it'll make it much more pleasant, but it'll make it much more viable. You're going to go back to making sure you're using and following, modeling self-care as it might be. Here are, a couple of suggestions in regards to promoting of self-care. Develop some strategies for your body, for your heart and soul, for the mind. You need outlets for the spiritual, the spirit. There are many of us who are religious. There are many of us who are spiritual. It doesn't have to be an organized transaction. It may be a moment where you just look up to the heavens, or you look down to the earth and you just, the dirt of the earth, and you just find your spiritual moment along with a breath, and you decide, I can regroup and I can head back. And looking for that social support of others, that common ground, that sounding board. The body can be in shape, the heart and soul can be in shape, but if you're feeling isolated and that you have no one to turn to, you need that social support to make sure that you feel validated in this experience that you're going through. None of this is simple by any stretch of the imagination, and everybody processes differently, that's for sure. So that self-care, you may find that one of the categories or elements there, I'm pretty good with the body, I'm pretty good with the spirit, but boy, I don't take a moment to really just breathe and clear my mind and let it be free. So I'm going to practice really working on clearing the mind, etc. These are all good strategies to try to promote that self-care. Get that stress relief. There is nothing worse than tense shoulders or a knot in the stomach and unable to take in good nutrition because you're just constantly in the worry mode. You want to get rid of that and find that stress relief. I can't tell you, we should all be hydrating to the very best of our abilities, absolutely, as should our charges, as should our individuals, particularly our seniors. So good nutrition, good hydration for everybody. I vote yes, good nutrition. I volunteer that all the way around. Good nutrition, good hydration. We've already talked a little bit about sleep, but I just can't reiterate enough how very, very important a good night's sleep is. I don't know about you, but I know I'm not 25 anymore. And I used to do those, proverbial all-nighters where I was supposed to be studying, but probably I was halfway studying and halfway socializing. But I didn't miss a beat. The next day, the test came or the activity came and I did it. These days, if I don't didn't get my sleep. I'm achy. I'm out of sorts. So good sleep, again, cares for me so I can care for others. I want to make sure I have a connection in life, not just with my person that I'm responsible with and to, but with family, with friends, with spiritual. Where is that connection? And it may come from a support group, it may come from a complete stranger who's experiencing a similar diagnosis as your loved one, and you are able to connect and discuss your experiences and really find some compassion and some support in that regard. Some of us, it's all about physical activity. I think it should be more about physical activity for me, but I tend to, I think it's good for all of us, and I tend to put that on the back burner. For others, it's really a necessary entity. I have to get out, I have to move. I'm better as a result. So making sure I get in that physical activity that meets my needs. Some of us, it's 15, 20 minutes, others, it's 2 hours, 5 hours, whatever it might be. Make sure it suits to your wishes and wants for your self-care. I'm a huge proponent that we practice kindness. I think kindness gets returned. So if I'm kind and I present in that fashion, I truly believe for the most part, kindness will come back my way. And I think that's a good element of self-care, absolutely. And then that spirituality again, just we may not know, or excuse me, we may not have this strong, organized approach to religion or whatever our belief system is, but I think we all have as well an element of spirituality in us, and that we believe in the good and desire the good for all beings on this planet. So having a basis in that and relating it to your sense of self-care, I think is a critical part of being successful in your role as a caregiver. Not an easy role. This one, I think, again, is an important criteria, or important element. You know when to say when. Yeah, again, I have a client who I've been with 4 years now, and 2 years ago, I said to him in one of our first meetings that there would be someday, he's the most devoted spouse I've ever run across. I said to him one day, you will not be the best thing for her. And he, if looks could kill, I would have been a goner at that point. And he said, you're so wrong, Gail, and I'll show you. And 2 years later, he called me, not out of the blue. We've kept in touch. And he said, oh, I hate to say it, but you were right. I don't think I'm the best thing for her at this point. And it's, really doing me no service either. I'm struggling. So it may happen, and you just have to know your limits and know when to say when. One of the major criteria or elements that I'm really encouraging families to look at is safety. Your safety and your client, or excuse me, your caregiving recipient safety. Both elements of safety are critical in this equation. So whether it be lack of sleep, lack of support, whatever the safety measure, could be the physicality of the home. But whenever someone is no longer safe, is when you really have to look at other alternatives. Making sure that your loved one is safe, that your loved one could harm themselves. If you're concerned about them harming themselves or others, then again, we're not safe. If there's, I went to go out and assess a home the other day for the viability of a woman to return to her home. And the home could have been built on stilts. There were 3 accesses to the home. All of them were 20 steps of a stairway to get up to the home. I couldn't promote her going home. I can't negate those 20 steps. And all I can envision is she gets up the 20 steps and she's trapped upstairs and she's in danger. And how are we going to get her down those 20 steps in an emergency? So we don't ever want harm coming to anyone in any situation. So that's when we know it's time to look at other alternatives and options. When your own safety or your own health is at risk, again, that self-care has been tried and it isn't coming through for you, and you're not rebounding the way that you want to rebound, it's time to look elsewhere and reevaluate. What are we doing? Where are we going? how can we do this better? And what role am I going to play? I would tell you that when you make changes, you don't discontinue being a caregiver. You just simply, you change your role. You're still a caregiver. You're still the important party. It's critical. But what you are not is the one-to-one caregiver at that point. So very viable, very feasible. But you just have to know when to say when your own health and safety are at risk. And then the stress of caregiving, it may impact your ability to actually provide proper care. You may not have the skill set, the training, the adaptability, the attention, the viability to provide all the services that your loved one might need. So again, looking around, making a collective decision, consulting others, talking with others, deciding, I'm not sure I can do this any longer, and this is why. And maybe there are resources out there, and you'll find that you can go another period of time or another transaction. But again, if it's impacting your ability to provide the proper care, then it just doesn't feel good. And I think it's true. There's really absolutely no definitive right or wrong decision in any of this. This is all a learning process. It's a time to reevaluate. This is, for some individuals, this is all new territory. So there isn't really a wrong or right decision. Get educated, put your ducks in a row, know where your resources are financially, emotionally, fiscally, support-wise, and make the decisions that you need to make. Never easy to make these decisions, but you need a partner, and you also need to feel as if, again, you haven't done anything right or wrong. You're just doing the best you can with the tools that you have in the circumstance that you're currently in. Give yourself a little self-care once again on that one. I think that's a critical one. Remember, you're not alone. There are many people out there in this world facing what you're facing. Support groups are great. Educational transactions like the one we're trying to share with you today is important. Finding a partner in all of this, someone to bounce off of, someone to support you, someone to cry with you, someone to scream with you. I think these are all important things and elements of success. Remember the differentiation between selfish and self-care. This is all about the self-care that's necessary to be the best that you can be to the ones you love. And I know that by nature of the fact that you've sat in and listened to us drone on here, that you're actively pursuing the very best for yourself and the very best for your loved ones. So I applaud you. My hat is off to you. And again, you are never alone in this journey. And please don't ever feel that way. All right. I'll hand this back over to Maureen and give her a chance to sort of talk a little bit about caregiving, or excuse me, care management, and then entertain any questions or concerns that we've had in the course of this last hour.
Yes, thank you so much, Gail, for that information. A lot of great facts and tips and tools shared there. Just to ask a few questions that we received. How do I differentiate between formal and informal resources, and when I should connect with each one?
Oh, I think that's a great question. Again, I think our friends are so very lovely and they want to do so much. And I go through this personally. I have a lot of friends who've said, Gail, just call me if you need to get your daughter off to a doctor's appointment. And invariably, I'll give a call. And occasionally, more often than not, I'll be honest, my loved one or my friend, it's a conflict. And so I can't go back to the doctor's office or back to my daughter and say, can you reschedule that? I know that was a scan that was really important. So I have turned to formal mechanisms, people who I am paying to do the transaction. That's not easy. I know that comes out of a pocketbook. But for the really critical things, I want to have a litany of resources in my back pocket that are professional and formal in nature, so that when my informal resources are unavailable, I can always turn to those formal mechanisms. And we did this, again, another example, did this with my brother. And when he was caring for my mom at the end, I suggested to him that he might like a respite or a break from mom occasionally. Oh, no, I've got this. By week 2, day 5, he was calling and saying, could you maybe get one of those breaks for me? Also, mom wants to take a bath. I don't want to give mom a bath. So we, lo and behold, we went out and found a professional caregiver who could come in once a week for 4 hours, give my mom a bath. My brother would hightail it out of town or out of the house, I should say, for a few minutes and just breathe. And it was a wonderful combination of he needed the break, mom needed the formal support mechanism, and everybody, it was really what we would refer to as a win-win situation. So informal is great. It's not the singular and sole answer. I like to think that we put a safety net underneath the charges that we have, and we want to put a good, strong safety net, excuse me, underneath them. And if we just have informal mechanisms in that safety net, we probably have some gaps. So we need to look at the formal mechanisms, and there's a plethora of them out there. We're really good at problem solving those kinds of issues and always available to guide you.
Thank you very much. Just one more question for you. How has caregiving changed during the time of COVID?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Boy, it has changed dynamically and massively. We're all, of course, concerned about the exposure to COVID and the fallout as a result of that exposure. We're concerned about vaccines and one-on-one interactions, etc. So I would tell you first and foremost, caregiving is in high demand and short supply. So be cautious, particularly as you look for professional caregiving. We are scrambling to get individuals vaccinated. We are scrambling to get people back to work, and the demand has never been higher. So COVID has changed things dramatically. And I think the second blush that it's changed is, now again, how do we protect everybody in that equation? Our professional caregivers, let's be honest, they are looking to earn a living and an income. And so they're going to and from different homes. And so how do we insulate and isolate and protect as they go from these different homes into the next? We're practicing very good universal precautions, and we are not cutting corners. So again, caregiving has truly changed in that regard, and it is not a simple transaction anymore. So prepare yourself that you may wait for a caregiver, particularly if you go a professional route. They may not accommodate your schedule. You may be accommodating their schedule a little bit. And it is an honorable profession. But boy, we're seeing it really being tapped out quite heavily. So it's quite concerning. I'm quite unnerved a little bit by it. That being said, we're still accomplishing it. It's still happening. And I hope to think that going forward, we'll always have that human touch, that human one-to-one caregiving available, because human beings need that. We can't do everything with technology.
Very much agree. I think there's been so much fallout from this whole COVID chaos is what I like to call it, and hope that we can start to see things return to a more of a normal state and get back to living the way we used to. That would be fantastic. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then just want to share